My daughter forgot to turn off her phone, and I heard her say, "My mother makes me sick. I can't stand living with her anymore." I froze. Pretending I hadn't heard, I quietly sold my house and disappeared. When Melissa came back from her business trip, she was smiling and cheerful until she realized her key no longer worked. My name is Tammy Williams, and I'm 68 years old. I never thought that at this age I'd be telling a story like this, but life has its shocks that no one sees coming. Sometimes I think maybe I should have kept this pain to myself, stayed silent for the rest of my life. But I can't. I need to speak. I need someone to understand what really happened. For a long time, I thought maybe I was going crazy, that I was overreacting, that it was all in my head. I used to be a strong woman, the kind who doesn't give up easily, who faces life with courage and a kind heart. But some pain can break even the strongest soul. And that's exactly what happened to me one Tuesday in March, just 3 days after my daughter Melissa flew to New York for a marketing project. Melissa, 36 years old, works for a digital advertising firm. She often travels for business, each trip lasting about a week. I was always happy when she left, not because I wanted peace and quiet, but because it meant she was doing well, moving forward after her painful divorce. This time, I stayed at home in Seattle, taking care of Ethan, my 12-year-old grandson, the light of my life. When Melissa got divorced and moved back in with me, I worried life would get crowded and complicated. But instead, Ethan's presence filled the house with laughter and energy. That day, Ethan was at school while I cleaned, did laundry, and prepared lunch like usual. The simple life of a grandmother, and I loved it. I felt useful, needed, and still part of their world. Melissa often said, "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom. You're our family's guardian angel." Around 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was Melissa calling from New York, as she always did. "Hi, Mom. Everything's great here. The project's going really well," she said. "Sweetheart, I'm so happy for you. Ethan's been behaving so well. I made spaghetti for lunch. He loved it." "Oh, Mom, you're amazing. I don't know what I'd do without you." We talked for about 10 minutes before she said she had to go. My coworkers waiting. I wished her luck and hung up. I went back to hanging clothes when the phone rang again. It was Melissa. Strange, she'd just called. I answered anyway. "Did you forget to tell me something?" I asked. No one replied. But then I heard her voice talking to someone else in the room. She must have accidentally called me. At first, I thought about hanging up. It's wrong to eavesdrop, but then I heard her mention my name. "Jenna, you wouldn't believe how suffocating it is living with my mom. She's always around. I'm so tired of it." I froze where I stood, my heart pounding. I tried to tell myself she was just venting. Everyone complains about their parents sometimes. But then Melissa continued, each word cutting like a knife. "My mother makes me sick. She tries to control everything. I just want to disappear with Ethan, go somewhere far away. I can't take it anymore." The room spun around me. "Makes me sick," that phrase hit like thunder. My daughter was disgusted by me. She kept talking. She thinks she's this amazing mom, but she just smothers me. If it weren't for Ethan needing someone to watch him, I'd have left long ago. My hands trembled as I hung up the phone. I sank into a kitchen chair, feeling like I might throw up. Disgusted, that word echoed in my head. From the daughter I had raised alone, sacrificed everything for, opened my home to after her divorce, cared for her child as my own. Now I realized all those hugs, those "thank you, Mom" moments, those kisses on the forehead were lies. I broke down crying right there in the kitchen. I cried for the daughter I had devoted my life to, for all the years of sacrifice that meant nothing, for the illusion of a loving family. When Ethan came home from school at 4 p.m., I had wiped away my tears and forced a smile. But he's a smart boy. Grandma, are you okay? Everything's fine, sweetheart. Grandma's just a little tired. I made him a snack, but inside, I was empty. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking myself over and over, where did I go wrong? Why does my daughter see me that way? In the days that followed, I tried to act normal, but every time I saw Melissa's picture on the wall, her clothes drying on the line, or heard Ethan mention her name, I heard those cruel words again. Melissa still called every day, chatting cheerfully, asking about her son, talking about work. I responded as if nothing had changed, but inside, everything had. How could she act so well? Pretending to care while secretly despising me. And then, in the quiet of the house, I began to replay everything, every memory, every word, every action. Had all those years of love been nothing but a performance I was foolish enough to believe? I remembered the day Melissa moved back home after her divorce, 5 years ago. She said she wanted to live near me, that Ethan needed his grandmother, that she wanted to feel the warmth of family again. But now I wonder, did she really come back because she had nowhere else to go? Was I nothing more than a free babysitter, an unpaid housekeeper? I thought about every time I cared for Ethan when he was sick, when I stayed up through the night to feed him, when I took him to the doctor, when I sat with him to do his homework. I thought about every meal I cooked, every shirt I washed, every inch of that house I kept spotless. Were those the reasons my daughter found me disgusting? Each passing day, the wound inside me deepened, not only because of that call, but because I realized our entire relationship had been built on a lie. I had lived in the illusion that I was a loved mother, when in truth, I was just a burden, something she merely tolerated. Then, an idea began to form in my mind. At first, I was terrified, but the thought grew stronger each day. If I truly made her feel disgusted, if she couldn't stand to be near me, maybe it was time to do something that her disgusting mother would finally surprise her with. I need to start from the beginning. Otherwise, no one will understand the pain I felt when I heard those words. My story with Melissa began long before she was born. I was 31 then, full of dreams and hope. I met Mark at a summer fair in Kansas City. He was handsome, charming, worked at a mechanical workshop, and won me over with his confidence. We dated for 2 years before getting married. I worked as a sales clerk in a downtown fabric shop. The pay was low, but I was independent. I rented a small apartment and dreamed of having my own home. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought I was the happiest woman alive. Mark panicked when he heard the news. He said he wasn't ready, that we should have waited a little longer. But I convinced him that everything would be fine, that we'd be a complete family. The first months were tough: nausea, exhaustion, my belly growing heavier every day, but I was happy. I hid away small amounts of money to buy baby supplies, saving every dollar I could. Gradually, Mark became distant. He came home late, saying he had to work overtime. I believed him because I wanted to believe. When I was 7 months pregnant, my parents had a tragic accident on Interstate 70, driving back from visiting relatives in St. Louis. A truck crashed directly into their car. They died instantly. I was devastated. 8 months pregnant, alone, with no family left. I only had Mark to lean on. But that's when I saw who he really was. Instead of comforting me, he started complaining that I cried too much, that I had become sad and dull, no longer the cheerful woman he'd fallen in love with. 2 weeks after my parents' funeral, I came home and found a note on the kitchen table. I was 8 months pregnant. The note read, in shaky handwriting, "Tammy, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I'm not ready to be a father. You'll be a better mother without me holding you back. Good luck." He cleared out all his things, even took my favorite radio, leaving only $20 on the counter, as if that was enough. I collapsed into a kitchen chair and cried until there were no tears left. Alone. 8 months pregnant. No family, no husband, no one to turn to. Melissa was born a month later, after a difficult labor. I spent 3 days in a public hospital. Not a single visitor came. When I finally brought her home and looked at that tiny face, I swore she would never suffer the way I had. I promised I would be both her mother and father, that I would give her everything she needed, that I would protect her from every pain life could bring. I worked part-time at the fabric store because I had to nurse Melissa every 3 hours. My boss, Mrs. Linda, took pity on me and allowed me to bring the baby during the first few months. I used a cardboard box, lined it with a soft blanket, and turned it into a makeshift crib, setting it right behind the counter. When Melissa turned 1, I found a neighbor, Mrs. Margaret, to babysit while I worked. I paid her $50 a month, a huge strain on my budget, but I had no choice. Every evening after work, I was exhausted, yet still cooked, washed clothes, and cleaned the house. On weekends, while other mothers rested or went out, I stayed home sewing. My mother had taught me to sew when I was a girl, and that skill saved me. I sewed dresses, fixed clothes, embroidered baby items. Every extra dollar went into Melissa's savings account. When Melissa turned 5, I applied for a position at Wichita City Hall. I studied for months, waking up at 5 a.m. to review before heading to work. Melissa would sit nearby, playing quietly while I memorized laws, English, and math. She told me one day she'd study hard like her mom, that she wanted to make me proud. The day I received the letter saying I'd passed the civil service exam was one of the happiest days of my life. Finally, I had a stable job, a steady income, health insurance. I could give my daughter a better future. I decided to sell the small house. My parents had left me a modest 3-bedroom home on the outskirts of Topeka, with a tiny backyard. But it was my only asset. I sold it for a decent amount at the time and used it as a down payment to buy a new house in the Maplewood neighborhood, which was just starting to develop back then. The new house had 3 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a small yard in the back. I took out a 15-year mortgage with monthly payments that I could barely manage, though life was still tight. Melissa had her own room, a small yard to play in and plant flowers. When we moved in, she was only 7, her face glowing with happiness. She said it was the most beautiful house in the world and that I was the bravest mom she knew. That moment made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. During Melissa's school years, I did everything I could to give her better opportunities. I enrolled her in English lessons, swimming, and guitar classes. Every morning, I woke up early to make breakfast, drove her to school in the rain, and helped her with homework every evening. During school events, I always sewed her costumes, baked treats, and never missed a single parent-teacher meeting. Melissa was an exemplary student, high grades, well-behaved, always praised by her teachers. I was deeply proud, believing I was raising a daughter who would have a brighter future than my own. She used to say, "Someday, I'll take care of you, Mom. I'll take you traveling everywhere." When she turned 15, she wished for a big birthday party. I saved for 6 months, sold handmade crafts, and stayed up late sewing clothes to afford it. We rented a small hall at the community center, with a DJ and a beautiful cake. It was a perfect night. Melissa smiled brightly, saying it was the best day of her life and that I was the most special mother in the world. When she started high school, Melissa decided she wanted to study marketing. I didn't even fully understand what that meant, but if that was her dream, I would support it. I paid for extra classes, books, and transportation fees. I worked weekend shifts to cover the costs. When she was accepted into a private university in Chicago, I cried with joy. My daughter would be the first in our family to earn a college degree. She'd work in an office, have a career, and a bright future. Finally, all my sacrifices had paid off. I paid her tuition on time, even when money was tight. It wasn't a small amount, but I paid it with pride because I knew it was an investment in her future. Melissa studied hard, earned high grades, and was always responsible. During college, she met a young man named Ryan, handsome, from a good family, studying the same major. They dated for 3 years before deciding to get married. I was happy, thinking my daughter had finally found someone to share her life with. I helped with the wedding expenses. On the wedding day, Melissa looked stunning in her white dress, held my hand, and said she wanted me to be her mother of honor. I felt like the happiest woman alive. When Ethan, my grandson, was born, my heart nearly burst with joy. My first grandchild, the treasure of our family, Melissa, asked me to stay for a few months to help with the baby. I took a leave from work and moved in, doing everything a loving grandmother would: bathing him, changing diapers, preparing bottles, and waking up in the middle of the night when he cried. Melissa said I was her guardian angel, that she couldn't imagine life without me. Ryan was kind too, often saying I was the dream mother-in-law. But everything started to change when Ethan turned 2. Ryan began traveling for business, sometimes gone for a whole week. Melissa complained that he had become distant and cold, that she felt lonely. I comforted her, telling her every marriage goes through hard times. But a few years later, they divorced. Melissa had discovered Ryan was cheating with a coworker. She was devastated, cried endlessly, and swore she would never trust another man again. My heart broke for her because I saw her walking the same painful path I had once walked when Mark left me. Then one day, Melissa said, "Mom, I want to move back in with you." She said she wanted a fresh start, needed time to rebuild her life, and wanted Ethan to grow up near his grandmother. I opened my door without hesitation, thrilled that we could be a family again. For the next 5 years, I did everything for them. I cared for Ethan as if he were my own son, helped Melissa get back on her feet after the divorce, and managed the household. I truly believed we had finally found balance, a warm, happy family, until the day I overheard that conversation and everything shattered. In the days that followed, something inside me awakened. It was as if I had been living in a fog for years, and someone had finally turned on the light. I began noticing things I'd ignored before, re-examining actions I once excused, and questioning what I used to call normal. Ethan still came home from school every day, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while I prepared his snack. But now, every time he talked about his mother, about school, his friends, or the games he played, I listened more closely. It was strange to realize how little Melissa was involved in her son's life. It was always me attending parent meetings, buying school supplies, helping with his science projects. "Grandma, can you help me with my ocean animals project?" The teacher said parents are supposed to help, but mom's always too tired after work, he said one afternoon. That sentence felt like a knife twisting in my heart. Melissa came home around 6 p.m., ate a quick dinner, showered, then locked herself in her room to watch movies or scroll through her phone talking to friends. All the responsibility for Ethan was left to me. I was the one checking if he'd brushed his teeth, the one tucking him into bed, the one waking up at night when he had nightmares. On Saturday morning, I decided to test something. I pretended to have back pain and lay on the couch. I wanted to see if Melissa would take on the role of a mother. Ethan woke up early and came to me. "Grandma, can I have cereal?" "Yes, sweetheart. You know where it is," I replied. At that moment, Melissa walked past the living room, but didn't stop to ask if I was okay. She just went straight to her room and stayed there until nearly noon. Ethan ate breakfast alone, watched cartoons, and played with his toys. Around lunchtime, when he started getting hungry and whining, Melissa finally came out. Mom, what's for lunch? She asked, as if my pain had nothing to do with her. I haven't cooked anything. My back hurts, I said. She simply replied, Oh, then turned to her son. Ethan, do you want me to order pizza? Pizza for Saturday lunch. While I lay there, she found it easier to order food than to cook a meal for her own child. That's when I realized in Melissa's eyes, I was no longer her mother. I was just the housekeeper. And when the housekeeper couldn't do her job, the solution was to pay someone else to do it. The following week, I started paying closer attention to the household expenses. I was the one covering electricity, water, internet, and phone bills. I bought groceries, supplies, and school materials for Ethan. Melissa contributed only $200 a month, a symbolic amount, barely anything compared to the actual costs. But every time I asked her to help with an extra expense, she complained, Mom, I can't help with Ethan's dental bill this month. I'm short on money. Short on money, yet she still bought designer clothes, went to the salon every month, and dined out with friends on weekends. But when her son needed a dentist, suddenly she couldn't afford it. And as always, I covered the costs, withdrawing from my retirement savings. That was also when I started noticing how she spoke about me in front of others. One Thursday afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Carroll, a widowed woman living next door, came over for coffee. While we were chatting in the kitchen, Melissa came home from work and joined us. Melissa, you're so lucky to have a mother like Mrs. Tammy, Mrs. Carroll said. She takes care of Ethan like he's her own, keeps the house spotless, and cooks such delicious meals. Yes, my mom's really hardworking, Melissa replied, smiling a smile I now realize was forced. She likes staying busy. Ever since she retired, she doesn't know what to do with herself, so she just finds things to keep busy. Finding things to keep busy. Those words cut deep like a knife to the heart. As if all my years of care, sacrifice, and love weren't for family, but just a pastime for a lonely old woman. Mrs. Carroll gave me a sympathetic look. I simply smiled and changed the subject. But inside, another piece of my heart shattered. That weekend, I decided to have lunch out with Mrs. Carroll, leaving Melissa home with Ethan. I wanted to see how she managed without me. When I returned around 5 p.m., I found Ethan sitting in front of the TV with a bowl of instant noodles gone cold. What did you two have for lunch? I asked Melissa. Oh, I made noodles for Ethan. I wasn't hungry, she said, her eyes still glued to her phone. Instant noodles. A 12-year-old boy eating instant noodles for Saturday lunch just because his mother was too lazy to cook a proper meal. When I was home, Ethan always had rice, meat, vegetables, and dessert. But the moment I was gone for a few hours, he had to eat instant noodles. That's when I truly understood everything. I wasn't a beloved mother. I was just an unpaid employee working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I was the cook, the housekeeper, the babysitter, the driver, the nurse, when someone got sick. And worse, I was the one being disrespected. The following Monday, Melissa called from work, asking me to pick up Ethan because she had another long meeting, the third one that month. It was always the same story. I had to change my plans to clean up her messes. Grandma, why doesn't Mom ever pick me up from school? Ethan asked on the drive home. That question broke my heart. At 12 years old, he already noticed his mother wasn't really part of his life. And me always trying to protect my daughter, I made excuses. Your mom works hard, sweetheart. But for the first time, I felt disgusted with myself for lying. But Grandma, you worked when you were younger and still took care of Mom, he said, his voice innocent. He was right. I worked, studied, ran the household, and never once made Melissa feel alone. I never avoided my duty as a mother. But now, With everything I had sacrificed to give her a good life, Melissa treated motherhood like a part-time job, something to do only when convenient. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision that would change my life. I picked up my phone, went to the website of a real estate company in Seattle, one I often saw advertised. I wanted to find out how much my house was worth now. The next morning, an agent called back. Mrs. Tammy, based on the location and size of your home, we estimate its value between $700,000 and $950,000. Nearly $1 million. The little house I had bought with every sacrifice of my life was now worth a fortune. The neighborhood had become one of the city's upscale areas. That money could buy me freedom, something I had never dared to dream of. And then, a plan began to take shape in my mind. If Melissa truly wanted to get away from me, if I was just a burden, something that disgusted her, fine. I would give her exactly what she wanted, but on my own terms. I started paying closer attention to everything: the annoyed looks, the eye rolls when I spoke, the sighs every time I asked for a small favor. All of it had always been there. I had just chosen to forgive it before. Now, I saw the truth clearly. My daughter didn't love me. She merely tolerated my presence because it benefited her. The final straw came on Friday, when one of her friends came over for dinner. I prepared lasagna, set the table, and poured soda. During the meal, they chatted about work, life, and men, until the friend complimented the food. "This is delicious. Who made it?" she asked. "My mom did," Melissa replied. "She loves cooking, it's her hobby." Her hobby. That word froze me. Cooking, caring for my family, all of it, in her eyes, was just a hobby. As if everything I had done came not from love or duty. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea, and made the most important decision of my life. I would sell the house. I would take the money and start over, far from those who didn't appreciate me, far from the one who felt disgusted by me. But first, I had to take care of Ethan. I couldn't abandon that innocent boy. He was the only one in that house who truly loved me. I had to make sure he'd be safe before carrying out my plan. The following Monday, Melissa announced that she had to travel to New York for work for a week. This time, instead of worrying as usual, I saw it as an opportunity: 1 week to carry out my plan. 1 week to change my entire life. On Tuesday morning, after Melissa left and Ethan went to school, I began to act. The first thing I did was call a real estate agent to schedule a home appraisal. He said he could come by Wednesday morning, perfect timing, while Ethan was at school. I spent the rest of the day mentally organizing everything, leaving no detail unchecked. Everything had to be done quietly and precisely. Melissa couldn't suspect a thing until it was too late. The first person I needed to talk to was Mrs. Carroll, my neighbor. She was 72, widowed, and had always shown genuine affection for Ethan. Many times when I went grocery shopping or ran errands, I let him play in her yard. They were close, and she treated him like her own grandchild. On Tuesday afternoon, after Ethan came home from school and finished his homework, I went over to Mrs. Carroll's house. She was out in the garden watering her flowers, as always. "Hi, Carol. I have something important to talk to you about, if that's okay." "Of course, Tammy. Come inside, I'll make some coffee," she said with a warm smile, wiping her hands on her apron. We sat in her cozy little kitchen, which always smelled faintly of baked goods and had the kind of warmth only a kind-hearted home could have. Mrs. Carroll poured coffee into her old porcelain cups, a keepsake from her mother, then looked at me gently, waiting for me to speak. I took a deep breath and said, "Carol, I need a special favor. I'm leaving Seattle in a few days, and I wanted to ask if you could help look after Ethan for a while." She nearly dropped her cup. "Leaving?" Where are you going, Tammy? What's going on? I told her part of the story but didn't mention the phone call I had overheard. I simply said that Melissa wanted to live independently, that I felt I was becoming a burden, and perhaps it would be better for me to step away for a while so things could calm down. But Tammy, you can't just abandon Ethan. That boy loves you more than anyone. I'm not abandoning him, Carol. That's why I'm asking you. You know how Melissa is. If I disappear, she'll panic not because she misses her mother, but because she's lost her unpaid help. Mrs. Carroll fell silent for a moment, then nodded slightly as if she understood. She was a sharp woman, one who had seen more than I'd ever realized. When Melissa comes back from her trip and doesn't find me, she'll be lost. She doesn't know Ethan's class schedule, his friends, or even the other parents' numbers. That's when you'll step in to help, not because I asked, but as a kind neighbor helping a family in crisis. You think she'll let me help? Carol asked. She'll have no choice. Melissa has never learned to stand on her own. When she realizes she can't handle it, she'll grab onto any help she can find. She was silent, gently stirring the sugar in her coffee. I knew she was thinking it over. Tammy, are you sure about this? This isn't just a rash decision, is it? I'm sure, Carol. I've spent my whole life sacrificing for a daughter who now feels disgusted by her own mother. It's time I think about myself. She sighed, then took my hand. All right. I'll take care of Ethan for as long as needed. But you must promise to stay in touch, let me know where you are, and that you're okay. I promised. I told her Ethan would always know that, no matter how far away I was, his grandma still loved him and was watching over him. I trusted Carol with her kind heart to love and care for my grandson, as if he were her own. On Wednesday morning, the real estate agent came to see the house. He was young, professional, measuring each room, taking photos, jotting down notes, and complimenting how well the home had been maintained. The interior, the location, everything was perfect. Mrs. Tammy, your house is in great shape. Property values in this area have gone up a lot over the past few years. I could sell it for around $900,000 to $1.1 million, maybe even more. Almost $1.1 million more than I ever imagined. Enough to buy a smaller place elsewhere and live comfortably for the rest of my life. How long would it take to sell? I asked. With this location, a week tops. I can list it today if you'd like. I nodded immediately. He walked me through all the paperwork, legal steps, and selling procedures. It turned out to be much simpler than I thought. In just a week or two, I would finally be free. On Thursday, I started packing. I separated clothes, documents, family photos, and a few treasured keepsakes. My whole life fit into 2 suitcases and a few small boxes. The rest, the furniture, the appliances I left behind for the house. While cleaning, I came across old letters Melissa had written to me. Mother's Day cards, little notes she wrote as a child, and heartfelt letters from when she got into college. Mom, you're the most amazing woman in the world. Without you, I'd be nothing. Thank you for every sacrifice you've made for me. I love you more than anything. Reading those words, knowing they came from someone whose heart had since grown cold and resentful, felt like a knife straight through my chest. How could someone lie and pretend so well? I gathered the letters into a small box along with the farewell letter I was writing. I planned to leave it with Mrs. Carol, asking her to give it to Melissa when she came home, so my daughter could read her own words and feel the weight of her hypocrisy. On Friday morning, the agent called again. Mrs. Tammy, 3 people are interested in buying. One of them is ready to pay in full. Today, cash. Cash, $1,100,000. A perfect opportunity. No waiting for the bank, no drawn-out process. I could sign the sale and disappear before Melissa returned from New York. We scheduled the signing for Monday morning at the notary office. The buyer was a businessman from Portland, purchasing it for his daughter, who was about to start medical school in Seattle. A safe, clear, and legitimate deal. That weekend, I finished all the preparations for my departure. I set aside some cash for Mrs. Carroll in case Ethan needed anything and transferred the rest into a new account at a different bank. I bought a bus ticket to Ashland, Oregon, a small, peaceful town I had always dreamed of living in. Ethan noticed I was different, quieter. On Saturday evening, while we were watching TV, he sat close to me on the couch. "Grandma, are you sad? Is something wrong?" I looked at his worried little face, and my heart ached. That was the hardest part, leaving Ethan. But I knew it was only temporary. Carol would take good care of him, and I would find a way to remain a part of his life. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just thinking about a few grown-up things. You know Grandma loves you very much, right?" "I know. I love you too. You're the most important person in my life." Those words nearly made me give up, almost made me stay and continue living the same way. But then I remembered the cruel words, the contempt, the silent humiliations. I couldn't live like that anymore. "Ethan, no matter what happens, remember that Grandma is always here, in your heart. Sometimes people have to change, but love never does." He didn't fully understand what I meant, but he could feel that something was about to change. On Sunday night, I wrote the letter I would leave for Melissa. I rewrote it several times, trying to express everything I felt. In the end, I kept it short and clear. "Melissa, since you've said that I make you uncomfortable, that you can't stand living with me, I've decided to help you solve that problem. I've sold the house and stepped out of your life. Now you can live peacefully without having to endure your mother anymore. Mrs. Carroll will help you take care of Ethan until you get everything sorted out. Take good care of your son. None of this is his fault. Signed, your annoying mother, Tammy." Monday morning was bright and sunny. At 9 a.m., I arrived at the notary office to sign the papers to sell my house. By 10:30, the money was in my account. At 11, I was at the bus station with 2 suitcases, waiting for the 2 p.m. bus to Ashland. I left the letter and the old box of letters with Mrs. Carroll, asking her to give them to Melissa when she returned. I also handed her the house keys, explaining that the new owner would arrive on Thursday, so Melissa would still have time to collect her things. She would come back from New York on Tuesday night, walk into an empty house, and find a neighbor waiting at the door with a keychain and an envelope. Something that would change her life forever. Sitting on the bus, watching Seattle fade through the window, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for leaving behind a lifetime of memories, but also relief, because for the first time in decades, I had chosen myself. At 68, I was starting over. But this time, it was by choice, not by circumstance. 3 months after arriving in Ashland, I bought a small, cozy house in the center of town. 2 bedrooms, a living room overlooking a garden full of flowers, and a kitchen I only cooked in when I wanted to. For the first time in years, I woke up each morning and asked myself, what do I want to do today? Every week, Mrs. Carroll called to tell me what was happening back home. The first few calls made me cry, but they also reassured me that I had done the right thing. On Tuesday evening, Melissa returned as usual, expecting to find the lights on, dinner ready, and Ethan doing his homework. Instead, she found Mrs. Carroll waiting at the door, holding a set of keys and an envelope, her face serious. "Carol, what's going on? Where's my mom?" were the first words Mrs. Carroll later told me. "Your mother isn't here anymore, Melissa. She asked me to give you this." Melissa opened the envelope right there on the porch, under the porch light. Mrs. Carroll said her face changed color from pale to red, then to ashen. When she finished reading, she stood frozen for a long time, finally whispering, "No, my mom wouldn't do this." "Oh, she would, dear. Mrs. Carroll replied calmly. And honestly, after everything I've seen over the years, I don't blame her. In the days that followed, Melissa panicked. She called everywhere relatives, old friends, even hired a lawyer to try to reverse the house sale. But all the paperwork was legal, and the money was already in my account. That's when reality hit. Melissa realized she was now alone with her son, no home, no help, no safety net she'd always taken for granted. She had to rent a small apartment, reorganize her life, and learn how to be a real mother. Mrs. Carroll told me those first few months were chaotic. Melissa didn't even know Ethan was allergic to shrimp. She only found out when he had to be rushed to the emergency room after a dinner she cooked herself. She didn't know his school schedule, didn't know his friends, didn't have any contact numbers for other parents in case of emergencies. It was heartbreaking to watch, Tammy, Mrs. Carroll said during one call. She was completely lost, 35 years old, and didn't even know how to care for her own child. But Ethan, my little grandson, was stronger than I'd imagined. Bit by bit, he began teaching his mother how to be one. Ethan showed her where he kept his school supplies, told her his schedule, introduced her to his friends. From being cared for, he slowly became the one who cared. Mrs. Carroll kept her promise, always helping when needed. She picked Ethan up when Melissa worked late, cooked for him when his mother was on business trips. She offered the kind of support every family needs, but always reminded Melissa it was temporary. She had to learn to stand on her own. What surprised me most was how Melissa changed over the following months. Without me there to handle everything, she was forced to grow up. To take responsibility, she used to dump on me. Melissa learned to cook simple meals, to clean, and to be more involved in her son's schoolwork. She's becoming a real mother, Tammy, Mrs. Carroll told me last month. Slowly, but she's improving. Ethan said she stayed up late last night helping him with his science project. He said it was the first time she truly paid attention to his studies. Oh, and Melissa has started therapy too. She told me my daughter was now seeing a therapist in the city, trying to understand why she lost her mother the way she did. I can only hope that process helps her become a better person and a better mother. As for me, I'm learning to rediscover who I am, beyond the role of the selfless mother or the devoted grandmother. I signed up for painting classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, joined a morning walking group, and often had lunch with new friends in town. For the first time in decades, I had time just for myself. I also started going to the local senior community center. There's an elderly man named Arthur, a 70-year-old widower, who often invites me to watch movies and have coffee. It's too soon to say where things might go, but it feels wonderful to have someone who treats me with respect, listens to my stories, and genuinely cares about what I have to say. The money from selling the house has given me a sense of security I've never known in my life. I can pay my bills without worry, buy new clothes when I want, and even travel to places I once only dreamed of. Last week, I spent a weekend in Cannon Beach, Oregon, something I had always wished to do but never could. Ethan and I still keep in touch through Mrs. Carroll. She sends me updates, tells me about his schoolwork, and how he's adjusting to his new life. Last week, he sent me a drawing our family, him, me, Melissa, and Mrs. Carroll. On the back, he wrote, "Grandma, you taught me that love doesn't mean being together all the time. It means caring, even from afar. I love you." When I read that, I cried for an hour. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of pride, because I had raised a kind, thoughtful young boy. And they were also tears of peace, because I knew I had made the right choice. Melissa still hasn't reached out to me directly. According to Mrs. Carroll, she's asked about me if I'm healthy, where I'm living, but hasn't yet found the courage to make contact. Maybe she's slowly coming to understand, facing her own share of guilt in all this. I don't know if we'll ever reconcile. But honestly, I'm no longer willing to accept crumbs of affection. I won't live my life serving others while being disrespected. I've learned that self-love isn't selfish. It's survival. If Melissa wants me back in her life, it must be built on respect, true gratitude, and genuine love. Today, at 68, I've finally learned a lesson I should have understood long ago. No one has the right to make us feel small, not even our own children. And when that happens, walking away isn't betrayal, it's self-preservation. My new life isn't glamorous like a movie or perfect like a fairy tale, but it has something I was missing for decades: dignity. And I've realized dignity is worth more than any false declaration of love. The sun is setting over Ashland, painting the sky in soft orange and pink hues. I'll make a cup of chamomile tea, read a few pages of the book I bought yesterday, and go to bed early. Tomorrow I have painting class and lunch with Arthur. Simple as that. This story is a work of fiction inspired by true experiences, with names and places changed to protect the privacy of those involved. Tammy is not just the image of a wounded mother. She represents every woman who has spent a lifetime giving love and sacrifice, only to one day learn to love herself. Perhaps each of us has faced that same choice: to stay silent for the sake of peace or to speak up for the sake of dignity. Whichever path we choose, God sees our hearts and blesses those who live with honesty, compassion, and courage on their journey toward healing. If you're listening to this story, leave a comment. What would you do if you were in Tammy's place? Thank you for staying with me. And don't forget to check out the 2 videos suggested at the end of the screen, where every story carries a message of faith, forgiveness, and the strength of love.